how do you positively disrupt any, racism or discrimination, and even if you're not part of that underrepresented community, so anyone can be anti-racist.
What's going on, people? Welcome to 1000 Voices, where we are on a mission to interview 1000 Black British changemakers, people who are driving change in whatever field, industry or work that they're in. I'm your host for the podcast, Tevin, and today we've got another very wonderful guest on the podcast, Miss Jo, or Johanne, would you prefer to go by?
Jo.
Miss Jo Penney on the podcast. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm really good, thank you. Yeah, I'm doing really well.
Yeah, lovely to have you on. Thank you for coming to the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.
Anytime. Very excited to have you on. And yeah, just to hear a bit more about you, a bit more about your story, a bit more about some of the work you do as well. So thanks once again, man, for making the trip and coming down.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah. So before we kick things off, for people who may not be aware about yourself and the work that you do you mind giving us just a brief introduction? But in that introduction, most importantly of all, could you talk about why you do what you do? So who you are, what you do, and why you do what you do.
Okay. So my name is Jo Penney, and I'm the CEO and founder of a modern and progressive anti-racism consultancy, which essentially means that I work with modern brands and businesses who are authentically on their journey to diversify. And I work pretty much in the corporate space. So I do that through a range of mediums. So I'm a professional speaker. So I do TEDx style talks and expert talks in the corporate environment, and moderate quite a lot of panels and do presentations. My bread and butter stuff is actually designing and creating anti-racism workshops. So I do that corporate training, and I am a writer. So I write I didn't know I could write actually until COVID. Well, I knew I could write because I've got a law degree and I did loads of policy stuff. But actually I applied to a social media platform called Millennial Femme. It's a platform all about empowering Black women, and they were looking for writers. So actually, funnily enough, I started being their dating and relationship writer, much to my children's dismay. I was like, don't read it. And then quickly became their culture writer. So I write on all things like Black culture.
Yeah.
And I'm an executive mentor and coach. So I do one-to-one coaching and mentoring. I started off, my embryonic thinking for Amp Up Your Voice was to really sort of fill the gap for senior Black women executives who need support. But actually it sort of spread into coaching and mentoring a whole plethora of people, particularly those who have been given sort of diversity, equity and inclusion in the office, in the corporate environment. So I help them strategize and do that work. So yeah, my consultancy is called Amp Up Your Voice.
That's sick, man. A lot of stuff going on there. Sounds like you keep busy.
Yeah, I'm really tired.
Well, I appreciate you making the time
to
come down today. And it's interesting with the writing as well. You said that you started that around 2020, like COVID times. I feel like that was like a mad time for everyone because so much happened. Obviously, you've got the murder of George Floyd, which happened around that period.
Yeah.
And then it's lockdown, which is like, well, in my lifetime anyway, it's unheard of. It's unheard of for everyone, and probably usually. And it's like mad, isn't it? Because everything changed and there's a lot of shifts, a lot of people learning a lot about themselves, learning about maybe hidden talents that you've had, things you haven't explored, and all sorts of things. It was a crazy period.
It was unprecedented, but I think it gave us all a time to like reset and rethink, and actually gave us time. And I think if I hadn't have had that time, I never would have applied for that advert to be a writer, and actually I wouldn't be where I am now. Oh, I forgot to mention I've written an ebook recently. I haven't actually publicised it yet. Well, it's on my website.
1000 Voices exclusive.
Yeah, exactly. It's an exclusive right here. It's called The Roadmap to Diversity, Equity and Inclusion. But yeah, I never would have started. Never would have known that was a talent that I had unless it was COVID. So yeah, it was like totally mad that time.
Let's take it back here. I like to always set a bit of context behind the person and all of that. Learn a bit about what made you who you are today. So just to start off, could you like paint a picture as to what your childhood was like and what role that's played in the person you've become today?
Okay, big question. Also, I realised I didn't answer the second part of your first question, which was what my motivation, but maybe we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
For starting Amp Up Your Voice. My childhood, well, grew up in a pretty white neighbourhood. So I grew up in Windsor and Maidenhead. So my mum's from the Caribbean. Actually, I've just had my first visit to Anguilla when my mum was born, and took my little boy. And my dad is from Windsor, so English. So pretty, it was pretty harsh in terms of, demographics and being racially diverse, should we say. And I think that has shaped a lot of my reasons for doing what I do now. Also, I was brought up in a very strict religion, so Jehovah's Witnesses. So that was also very challenging as a child. And I don't think... I probably am now as a person really who I am, but I think for a long time I had to fit into moulds of either the religion or being stereotypes or perceived in a certain way because we were this, black family in a very white area. So it was quite challenging, let's say.
Did you experience any forms of racism, whether covert, overt, or any forms of prejudice, microaggressions, anything like that when you were growing up?
Yeah, and I think as the years go by and thinking retrospectively, there was just so much stuff that happened, but it kind of was swept under the carpet. But my dad had his own business and he was white, so pretty much he used to come home and tell us all these stories about what people would say about black people and in the area and the sort of stuff that he had to deal with having a black wife in a very predominantly white area. I remember when I was about 7, and we always used to go to Devon and Cornwall for our family holidays. We used to go camping for like 3 weeks. And I remember a white woman stubbed a cigarette out on my arm.
What?
And that was the first time I remember thinking as a kid, she's done that because I'm black. And she didn't like the look of me. Which is really hard, for a child. And I remember for years that really, really, it was sort of, it was really hit to the core because I really recognised in that moment that there was the reason why she did it was because I looked different to her.
You were 7 years old?
About 7 or 8 years old, yeah. I had the scar for a really long time.
How did that even happen? She just walked up to you and stubbed it on you or something?
Oh, we were shopping and it was all busy and she just, stubbed it out on my... And I remember I was really crying and telling my mum, and she's just like, let's just keep moving,
Wow.
And then my sisters and I went to, again, a predominantly white school. I think we were the only black girls there, or people there, and some Indian people. But you can imagine as a teenager, that was pretty tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you said your dad was white English.
Yeah.
And he was running the business and he was hearing things from people in the area and that kind of things. What kind of things were people saying to him? What was he hearing?
I can't really remember actually, but just the sort of comments that people make, or or I don't know, they're moving in, or the immigrant conversation. I think that was quite prevalent when I was growing up, and they're infiltrating, the big they.
That sounds like a lot of the rhetoric I was hearing during the Brexit, all that Brexit stuff, all that stuff I was hearing on the news actually.
Well, that's how Brexit got through, right?
Yeah, off the back of a lot of lies and a lot of misinformation.
Yeah.
And a lot of prejudice, if we're going to keep it real.
Yeah.
If we're going to keep it real, man, I've got a lot of issues with that whole referendum. I could talk for hours on that in of itself.
Yeah.
With your parents, what role would you say they played in your upbringing, and how important were their influence in you and you becoming the person you are? And I'm asked that as well specifically because you speak about your dad being white English, your mum being black Caribbean, and your dad's raising a black family and then hearing like certain comments from people here and there. I'm just wondering, what role, how did that impact anything? And what role did they play, in...
The way they brought us up was to be neither black nor white. So we were kind of nondescript. And at the time, I thought that was the right way. And I thought, I'm neither black, I'm neither white. And so that was, for me, the right approach. But when I came to London when I was about 19, well, I started coming to London when I was like 16, 17, but I moved to London when I was 19, 20, and I recognised that I am black and I'm perceived as black. And so being brought up with almost like a cultural like desert actually didn't really help me as a person. So actually I was on a real journey of discovery in my 20s about what it meant to be, who I am, what being black, meant. I mean, for instance, I remember when I first got to London, I started saying hello to every black person that I saw because and I quickly was like, oh, I'm really tired because there's a lot of black people. But, where we lived, if you saw a black person, you would stop and say hello and have a conversation with them, even if you didn't know them, because your commonality was, oh, you're another black person and let's have that camaraderie.
Yeah, that's quite interesting because where I work, to be fair, I'm quite fortunate, I suppose, to work in a place that's quite multicultural.
Yeah.
They do champion a lot of diversity where I work, so there is quite a lot of diversity. But then across the board, and you probably see it in your line of work, where you might have in some firms they're not diverse anyways, but then you got some that are diverse, but it's often confined to entry level positions, and then when you move up the ladder, it gets more and more white, male, middle class, and that's just how it is across the board. And a lot needs to be done to change that. But in my place of work, so you see the black people around, you do, the black nod. You might not even know them. You do the nod, you say a little hello.
Nod, yeah.
Yeah. And then it's funny because I went on a visit the other day to one of our client sites. So we've gone there, and they had some other people. So it's a big firm. And then I went there, one of my colleagues, and then some other firm went to visit them as well.
Yeah.
And then I saw a black guy leaving as we were coming in. And I don't know, I've never seen him anyway. We both done the
nod.
done the nod. And then I didn't even clock. And so I've gone, I don't even know the guy. He don't work where I work, but I've seen him in automatically. I'm like, yeah.
Hiya. Yeah.
I see you.
We probably still do it, don't we? Yeah, I see you and you see me, and I know probably what you're dealing with in this space.
Yeah. And when you spoke about you moved to London, obviously it's probably going to be a bit of a culture shock because you've grown up in a predominantly white area, you spend a lot of your holidays in Devon, Cornwall. Even if you did come to London, other multicultural areas, it wasn't like your norm, I suppose. And the first thing that comes to my head was a journey of self-discovery, and you started talking about that yourself.
Yeah.
Do you, what was that journey of self-discovery like for you? Did that start when you were living back in Windsor and Maidenhead, or what was that like for you?
Well, my first boyfriend, Jason Henry, we got together when we were 16, and he lived in Woodford Green in London. And so I started taking, having trips to London, met his mum, his sisters, and that really opened my eyes to my, our culture and the heritage and the food and the parties and and I was just like, wow, this is everything that I want. This is what I've been missing out on. So actually it was quite organic and quite natural, and we just and that just was the start of my journey, just meeting more and more people and doing more and more things, black things. I don't know what black things are, but it's just the food and the vibe and the energy and the conversation and talking about our roots and our heritage. That all just began for me about 16, 17 and just got amplified. Pretty
cool. And then so from there, so you've gone into the corporate world, and then you've worked in corporate world you've gone to university, worked in corporate world for a while, gone through whatever you've gone through, probably a culmination of your upbringing plus some experiences in the corporate world, and then founded Amp Up Your Voice. Before you founded Amp Up Your Voice, or even let's talk about founding Amp Up Your Voice.
Yeah.
Did you go through any experiences, whether growing up, whether at work? I don't know if it would have been a one experience or a combination of experiences, or maybe a journey over time, self-discovery, or I don't know how it looked like for you, but what led you to start at Amp Up Your Voice?
There was a catalyst.
Okay.
And that catalyst was in the work environment.
Okay.
So I had many discriminatory experiences, but very covert in the corporate space. And actually, they're quite hard to articulate. You get in your feelings, it's quite hard to prove that you've experienced in certain things, as you will know. But this was real first-hand discrimination that I experienced in the workplace. So, to cut a long story short, I just thought, this is one battle that I am going to have. Eventually, they gave me a significant payoff and made me, or asked me to sign an NDA, so a non-disclosure agreement, and never to speak of it again, which is how a lot of this racism is perpetuated in the corporate space. And I thought, I can go and get another senior executive role, but I'll be experiencing the same sort of issues. And as you pointed to, the more senior you become, the harder it is. The more senior leadership roles, it's more and more difficult to have that equitable playing field. So I decided to start up Amp Up Your Voice to really support black people, specifically black women, in terms of when they needed support, when things had gone wrong. You know, me being a case in point, I recognised there was a huge gap there in terms of, you know, I literally had nowhere to go and nowhere to get help from. And I was completely blindsided, and it really affected my personal life. It decimated my personal life and my professional life. And yeah, I had to stop and reset and take a minute to work out what it was that I was going to do. So I took the money, and I'm completely self-funded, as we talked about earlier, and set up Amp Up Your Voice. And that was late 2019. And then early 2020, we had the very public murder of George Floyd. And that really propelled Amp Up Your Voice in terms of what is it that what's within my gift, what's within my remit, my influence, my power that I can do to actually make some of those changes that are really going to shift the dial. And I knew that my key strengths and skills within that corporate setting. So I was able to take my senior executive experience plus my lived experience and really build the Amp Up Your Voice proposition. And I've been really lucky. I've been able to navigate. I work up to, but mainly at C-suite level, and I've been able to really navigate the very thorny landscape and do the educational piece, the training, the speaking, the writing, which I believe is making a difference.
That 2020 period, I mean, we were talking about it just before we started, but that 2020 period, I thought was a mad period. Yeah. For a lot of people, it was a massive global shift, and especially as a black person. Yeah. Because you've got the COVID pandemic, which you're locked up at home, unheard of. You're locked up. You cannot go out. Nothing's open. You're just at home. So that in of itself is a mad shift for a lot of people. Yeah. Then you got the murder of George Floyd around that same period as well. Just mad. It's a massive shift. Yeah. And I realized around that period of time where a lot of people were, because you've got a lot of black people who have been screaming about these kind of issues for a while. Maybe it's been falling on deaf ears. Yeah. Things just haven't been happening quick enough. A lot of people have been facing a lot of discrimination. You talk about what happened with you in your place of work, and the fact that you've had to sign an NDA and then being paid off goes to show that they know that they were guilty. Like they know what's up, but they want to keep it hush hush. Yeah. And there's been a lot of things happening for a hell of a long time. I know a lot of people that have gone through a lot of racist experiences in the workplace, which is mad. And then it's sort of like, you know, being brushed, wherever, or you're told that it's not what you think.
It's not true.
Yeah.
You're imagining it.
Yeah.
It could have happened to anyone.
Yeah. That kind of stuff. I got a few stories from friends that people have told me about that kind of thing. But then that George Floyd murder really put all of this right on the map for everyone. And, you know, a lot of corporations now started talking about, well, a lot of corporations started talking about it. I think a lot of it was performative personally, with the black squares and whatnot.
Black squares.
Yeah. My question was always, it's great. I think it's good to talk about it. I'm not saying the talking is wrong. I just feel like it should always be backed up by some level of tangible action, especially if you're a massive corporation that has the resources to do some kind of a tangible action. And yeah, like, I felt like there was a lot of energy for it back then in 2020. Do you feel that energy in your line of work? You've been doing it since late 2019 till now. Has that been sustained, in your opinion, when you work with these corporations?
I would say, you know, you're right. Absolutely. It was almost like, I was going to say the perfect storm, but obviously not perfect because there was a murder. But the COVID, George Floyd, you know, George Floyd is not the first person to be murdered through police brutality, and he won't be the last. But actually all those factors happened at the same time. And we, like I said, we were all locked up, etc. And people had the time and the remit and the space to have that reflective thinking. And I think it was pretty much performative and quite knee-jerk after George Floyd was murdered. So 2020, there was a real sort of global awareness that we don't have an equitable playing field, not in society, not in the corporate space. And so actually people really want to do something about it. And I like to say 2021 was like a real call to action. And you saw lots of recruitment, lots of tactical moves in terms of heads of DE&I or ED&I or ED&IB, whatever it was that you want to call. I'm not into the acronym more. I think it's taken away from the actual message. I think in 2022 and 2023 now, I think, people pretty much have got it's the right thing to do, and we need to do something about it. But there's still a huge disconnect. And that disconnect is, how do we take that theoretical knowledge and turn that into that tangible change and really drive that positive action piece so that we do have, like you said, that investment, changes in recruitment. How do we protect and invest our Black and ethnically diverse, individuals and groups and underrepresented communities? So I think that's where we're at. I think there's still a disconnect, and people pretty much now are saying and asking me, particularly in Amp Up Your Voice, yeah, we get it, what do we need to do? And although I say, listen, I can't give you an instruction manual, I can give you some tools and techniques, I can get you to have that reflective thinking, I can get you to do the educational piece, and you put in the work. Because you know what, when I walk out the room, you're going to need to be able to confidently navigate any situation or conversation that comes up. So, and also it's a constantly evolving and shifting space. It's not a static space. So, what might be relevant now in 2023, in 6 months' time, the language might have changed or whatever. So the people have to be on that individual and reflective journey, as well as your, in the corporate space as well as a business. But I would say the momentum was really strong in 2020. I think there's still momentum now, and I work with loads of amazing businesses who really want to get it right, and they really want to understand, you have that comprehensive understanding and understand what it is they need to do. I think the problem is we still are pretty much lacking investment. So actually you need money to make a difference, and like you said, some of it can be quite performative. So if you're just going to have a workshop or a bit of training, actually that's not going to be the cultural shift or change that you need to actually really make a difference. So it's really about that long-term journey and having that longevity. And I always talk about having a real strategic approach. So really identifying what's relevant to you as an organisation, like what are the gaps, where are your gaps, what's the knowledge you need to improve on, what are the practical steps that are relevant to you and your business that are going to make a difference.
That's cool. Now, I like you said something that I really liked. You like that a lot of people you're working with are very open to, and they want to be able to make some kind of a change of some sort, which is good. And I'm a massive believer that until every group, until everyone in society in the UK is good, then none of us are really good. I really do believe in that. And the way, in my eyes, what I feel like a perfect workplace or perfect world would even be would be a place in which that me as a young black man can converse with anybody about and tell them about my background and be proud without thinking that they're gonna think something of me. In the same way, I love culture and love hearing about people's backgrounds and that kind of thing. Yeah. And I'd love to talk to people about where they're from. And
I knew you were going to say that. That's a big debate, but yeah.
In what sense?
No, we all ask where people are from, and we're interested in people's backgrounds. But we've all saw the Lady Hussey story at the Palace and asking Nkosi where she was from, and it was probably one of the biggest questions and biggest debates that I get in my workshops. I'm just interested in knowing where someone's from.
That one is different.
That is different.
That one was a bit nuts. I think personally, I've seen a lot of
it's
debate.
Wild. Yeah.
I've seen some debate online, but like that one's crazy.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah.
No, I just believe in an equitable world, an equal world where I can talk to someone and be proud and be like, I'm British. This is all I know. I was born here, but I've got heritage and whatnot. I can talk about my culture and that kind of thing. Someone else can or whatever, and there's no prejudice or whatever kind of thinking. Just believe in that kind of a a nice world where we can just talk and no one thinks ill of anybody.
The perfect world.
Very Martin Luther King-esque.
Esque, yeah.
Very, what do you even call it? Like, I don't even know how to explain it. Kind of like, maybe a bit naive, but that's, it's what I think would be perfect anyway. And I like the fact that you said that people are open. Yeah. Some people are open. They just maybe need the coaching or the guidance in order to make the kind of change that they want to see. And when you spoke about amp out your voice at the start, you say you do a few things as an individual anyways, but you do some kind of talks, like the TEDx type talks, you do the consultancy type of things. When you're speaking with these people, especially the ones who you're teaching them, they're wanting to make change, like it just probably needs to be backed up by maybe some structure, some actionable things that they can do. What do and I know it's gonna change by client, but generally speaking, like how would you advise someone or organizations that are wanting to make change? Like how does it work? What does it look like?
Yeah. I suppose it's really, relevant to the particular organisation. So there isn't a one-stop answer. So, everyone's on a different stage in their journey. So the core of it is really developing that comprehensive understanding of what anti-racism means and what it is, or diversity, equity and inclusion. Once you have that understanding, that could be through training, that education piece, having conversations, etc. Then working out, is your organisation representative of a multicultural society? So that's your diversity piece. And actually you need, data metrics, you need to really assess your position, you need to have a holistic view of what's going on in the organisation. And that can take many different strands that you need to pull together. So really having that real clear understanding of your brand, your organisation, your positioning, your messaging. And then once you have been able to tackle that diversity and be honest with yourself, it really then is about how, and it's what you were speaking about, how do you then create an inclusive environment where everyone feels like they can belong? Because it's relatively easy to have a recruitment drive and have a diverse workforce. But actually, once those people are then in place in your business, how then are you ensuring that belonging piece, that people can authentically be themselves, that they are getting promoted and recruited, and their talent is being developed? So it's about recognizing some of those obstacles and challenges that you may have. And that is when we hear people say, it can be an uncomfortable conversation. That's why, because you sometimes it's an uncomfortable truth of what of what your position is. And then once you've done that, so I'm kind of giving you building blocks.
Yeah.
So you really want to secure that inclusion piece. It's then really that, how do you have that positive action piece? So if I'm talking specifically in the corporate space, that professional engagement, how are you ensuring that it is an equitable landscape for everybody that works for you? And that's a lot to do with advocacy and that those tangible changes and outcomes that we spoke about earlier. So really getting down to the granular detail, how do you put that in place? And that can be different for lots of different organisations, but what is within your relative remit, influence and power to make those changes within the organisation. And I pretty much help organisations on their long-term journeys as well, so help them strategize. So what's your strategy? So in the way that you would approach any other aspect of your business is the way you want to be approaching diversity, equity and inclusion. Strategic. Is it embedded as a valued culture within the organisation? Does it fit into your overall corporate strategy and objectives? Or is it something siloed that's on the shelf that you pick up and and put down as and when you need it? Because if you're doing that, it's performative, it's not authentic, and you're just not going to have a genuine diverse workforce. But if you embed it as a valued culture and it goes across the business and the people in it, then you've got a pretty good chance of having a robust, diverse and inclusive organisation.
Yeah, like you said, it can be relatively easy to have a recruitment drive, which is probably what a lot of organisations are doing, which is why maybe entry level there's a bit more diverse. You go up, it gets less diverse, but wherever it's relatively easy to have like a recruitment drive, then the inclusion side of it is a bit more of a challenge. And then it's evidence because a lot of these firms, when you look at black staff, attrition rates, black staff are leaving at a lot higher rates than white staff and maybe other. I don't know about other groups, but definitely against white staff. Yeah. And that's yes, I think it's the same across quite a lot of firms. Definitely even finance, and I think I read something about it being in law as well. But I think it's probably the same across all of industries. Yeah. So a lot of firms, a lot of organisations are getting the inclusion piece wrong in some way, shape and form. How do you generally believe, and again I know it can vary, but generally speaking, what ways can organisations make their workplaces a bit more inclusive?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about that, retention, that recruitment, how do you attract, retain and, promote and develop your new and existing talent? And that is the massive question on how organisations do that. But it really does start with the work. Again, I keep going back to that comprehensive understanding. But the bottom line is that everyone stereotypes based on what people look like. So you have to actively replace those stereotypes. And there's a variety of ways you can do that. But, if you do not know anyone who is black, or you don't know anyone from a protected characteristic, everything you know or you think you know is what you read, what you see, what's on Netflix, what's in the newspaper you read, and it's all, do you know what I mean? It's all societal, it's all fed to us. So actually, a lot of it is how do you challenge those biases? How do you challenge those stereotypes? And how are you able to proactively and tangibly to make those changes? So, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
In a roundabout way.
Do you ever come across people that are just not interested?
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
I mean, it's hard. It's hard work, right? It's exhausting. And, I know pretty much when I walk into a room or a talk or a workshop or a strategy meeting, not 100% of those people in that room are going to be on board with the conversation. That will eventually, come to fruition in the conversation or in the workshop or whatever. And, in the beginning, I think I really tried to tackle it all head on all the time. But actually, I think it goes back to, I don't need to do the work for you. You need to do the work. And if you're not on board, then you can stay there. That's fine. And that's for your organisation then to deal with the people who are not on board with the conversation.
Right, so it's sort of like focusing on the people that are willing, I suppose, and the ones that aren't willing, you don't put too much energy into it, in a way.
Yeah, because it would take too much of my, that self-preservation to not give. I'm really giving you a lot and sharing my lived experience and sharing my professional expertise with you. I don't have to justify or, respond to unsolicited, questions or, so I try and be, I always try and be positive and give good advice to those people, let's say, but it can be quite difficult.
I mean, I agree with that anyways. I think there's only so much you can do, like, you know what I'm saying? You can't expend all your energy trying to speak to someone that doesn't want to listen. I've had some, not too much of that, to be honest. People that I've come across with 1,000 Voices have been quite willing and receptive. A lot of people actually.
That's
but
good.
Then sometimes you get some, you
just know it.
I even see social media is fake a lot of the time. You see some of the comments and then you might get into a little battle or something. I'm thinking to us, what am I doing? Like back and forth with someone over. If you don't understand, if you're not even trying to understand, then when there's no point. Like, we're just wasting our time here. Let's just move on and talk to people that actually want to listen. So I agree wholeheartedly with that as well. Especially with something when you're talking, it's like it's your lived experience. It's just personal stuff as well, and it's very personal for a lot of staff who are who may be feeling like they're not being heard, not being listened to, maybe experiencing some maybe some covert, overt forms of racism or prejudice or whatever, but people maybe telling them, oh no, it's in your head, etc. Like we were saying earlier on, it's real for a lot of people. It's real lived experience, and if there's someone that don't want to hear it, they're not willing to help you, you ain't really got time. You know, there's people out here that really need your help.
They really and they want to help, you know.
So like just talk to people that, you know, are willing to help, and who really believe, like, I suppose, in the work that you're doing.
And I think, you know, it's like you were saying earlier, I think that, you know, people have been talking about this for a long time, but actually, particularly after George Floyd was murdered, I think a lot of people found their voice, and a lot of people found in the confidence to navigate this conversation and do so with their chest. And, you know, I think that has been the change that I've seen, and it has happened to myself as well, you know, way more confident to say, you know, part of being anti-racism, is being able to speak up, step up, interrupt when you see, hear, witness bias, racism, etc. And, you know, I think if people in the room are not on board with that, then that's not our problem, but we need to listen to those voices now.
What's anti-racism? Can you define it in your words?
I think it's just being proactive. It's proactively challenging, and, you know, it's not passive, it's active. How do you positively disrupt any, you know, racism or discrimination? And, you know, even if you're not part of that underrepresented community, so anyone can be anti-racist.
Right, okay. So let's move on very slightly, still on the same topic, but talk about allyship a bit.
Yeah.
In your eyes, what does a good ally look like?
Someone who, so I would say, you know, an ally is like a friend and a supporter, or an individual, or for underrepresented community that you're not part of. An advocate, I would say, is much stronger than someone who really stands up and advocates and supports and interrupts it, you know, for those individuals and underrepresented communities. So they're used interchangeably, the two terms, allyship and advocacy. But I think advocacy is what we were talking about earlier, is that more of that, you know, how do you use your remit to advocate for individuals and groups that are underrepresented. And that could be through a range of things. That could be that investment piece. That could be, you know, professionally engaging in a way that you haven't done before. That could be if you're in recruitment, challenging your stereotypes and understanding why you might not be recruiting or promoting certain people. You know, so yeah, I think it's all of those things.
Perfect. All right. What's your vision? Like, what kind of a world or workplace are you trying to build with all the work that you're doing?
I will say that I'm doing this for my kids and my kids' kids. And I honestly don't think that in my lifetime I'm going to see absolutely the change that I want, that, you know, that we want to see and that I want to see. But I do believe, and I have to believe, that the work that I'm doing is making a difference, and it is changing people's attitudes, and it is that educational piece. And I feel like, you know, when we have that justice piece and everyone gets what they need, that's when the pink confetti is going to come down from the sky and the unicorns are going to be going across, you know, and hopefully, you know, we won't be having these conversations. That's the world that I'd like to see, is that when we actually do not have to sit here and talk about how do we level the playing field, how do we have equity, how do we stop people being judged on the colour of their skin or their disability or their sexuality, you know, etc.
Well, what do your children think about your work?
They're really proud of me. Yeah, they're really proud of it. Particularly my 10-year-old, he's been on board with Amp Up Your Voice. He's my partner in crime. He's helped me design the logo. And, you know, I can tell through the conversations that we have that he's really taken on everything I do. And, you know, all the stuff that we talk about, it's been a real educational, like, journey for him as well. And my older boys are super proud, and they're like, you know, go on, mum, like, you're really doing it, and so proud. That's what they say, is so proud of you, so proud of you.
Amazing. What advice would you give to somebody who's trying to actively drive some change in the world, in their workplace, in their life, trying to do something positive, what advice would you give someone like that?
Just keep going, believe in what it is, your purpose, really understand your values and who you are as a person, and, stick to those and have that conviction behind what it is, whatever it is that you're trying to change or achieve. You'll meet a lot of people along the way that probably may discourage you or tell you that it's not possible. But I really believe you have to have that conviction behind your whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. And I think being realistic, that it's not always an easy job, it's not always an easy task, but just keep going, keep talking to everyone, keep learning, keep educating, and get yourself and others. And I think, you'll get there.
So you speak about having a conviction and keep going. I guess you're gonna have periods of time where it's gonna be tough, especially especially I guess in this kind of work you're doing. You're gonna have periods where you're knocking on heads that people ain't listening. And you're really trying to get them to understand. Like, why can't you guys understand? Like, I've told you 10 times, you still don't get it. But it can be frustrating. What's the reality like what's your reality like? Do you have any major challenges, and in not only in trying to get people to understand, but literally just running a business? What's it like?
Well, I've just been to the Caribbean. I've just been for 3 weeks. It was the longest holiday I've had in years. But I knew I was pretty much getting to burnout after 3 years of being, and I was describing it to someone today, saying, you know what, I didn't realise, but I was on a complete hamster wheel, and I was just going. And actually, in some ways, it's really good because everything you do motivates you to do something else, or write something, or speak to someone else, etc. But now I've got off the wheel. I'm like, it's when you have your own business, you are the marketing person, the social media person, the branding person, the pitching person, the policy person. You're basically wearing so many different hats. So I think it's only sustainable initially when you start your business, but then you have to start expanding. So I've got a small team now. So I have people that work for me freelance. I have 2 virtual assistants, accountant, etc. And I think you do need to be able to delegate, and you do need to have resources put into the business. And then that just comes with growth. But I think, again, being strategic about it and being realistic about what your capacity is actually, if you're spreading yourself too thin in all those different areas, actually you're not going to have a very successful business. So I think it's being able to outsource, find resources, even if that's volunteers. In the beginning, I had loads of people that wanted to be on board with Amp Up Your Voice and volunteer, and it was amazing. I had, so many people. And then eventually I was like, okay, I think now I can move on to getting a team. So
that's amazing. What have you learned about running Amp Up Your Voice that you haven't read about in any book or listened to in any podcast or anything like that?
I think you just get to know yourself really well. And no one can teach you that, you're not going to read that in a book, but it is a massive journey of self-discovery. You understand your potential, and we all have so much potential. And actually, I think for me, having my own business, it's the first time in my life I've tapped into my full potential. I've never been in any position that I've had, they've never tapped into my full potential, or it hasn't been tapped into. So, I feel really proud and fulfilled, and oh my God, I've done all this amazing stuff, and I'm like, wow, you've done that. And I think everyone has that, and so I think that's one of the real positives of having your own business.
What's quite cool is that it sounds as if, although you work very, very hard, and there's that side of it, at the same time it's very fulfilling. Very, very fulfilling for yourself compared to any work that you've done in the past. So then I suppose it sort of stems from the fact that it's a thing that you're passionate about. It's something that you have a lot of your own lived experience in a lot of different unique ways, from where you've grown up to your workplace experiences, and then all of that, and it's all culminated in you being the person you are now, and then running Amp Up Your Voice. You have a lot of experience in this area. And I guess it's bringing you a sense of fulfillment that you haven't been able to find in other places so far.
Yeah, it's been amazing. It's
Yeah.
been really, really amazing. Yeah, and I've had a lot of fun along the way as well. And the thing that I love the most is people. I love people, and I've, setting up Amp Up Your Voice, I've just been able to speak to, network, work with so many different people, and that is a really fulfilling part of the job. It's amazing, and that's
great. All right, and then as we prepare to wrap up, what's next for you in your journey?
Yeah, who knows? No, that's my strategic approach. I've got big ideas for Amp Up Your Voice. I am working with a lot more organisations and corporates now in their longer term journey. So really having that longevity. So in the beginning, I was pretty much doing like everything, any engagement, any presentation, any panel, Insta lives, just the whole lot. And now I'm able to sort of navigate more, the kind of roles that I want to be doing with Amp Up Your Voice, and that is helping organisations in their long-term journey and having that strategic approach. And I've got a few big ideas in the pipeline.
Nice. Watch this space.
Yeah, watch this space. Definitely watch this space.
All right, perfect. Yeah, that's that. Thanks for coming on.
That went really quickly.
Yeah. It flew by. It flew by. We've been here for, I don't know how long. Yeah, almost an hour probably now, but it felt like it's a lot shorter.
Yeah, but really quickly. Yeah, really quickly. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate you coming on, sharing your story, dropping gems, making us laugh, all of that, man. So, thanks for coming to the podcast. As we're wrapping up, if people want to keep up to date with yourself, with Amp Up Your Voice, how can they do so? And do you have any closing words you want to share with us?
Oh, closing words.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll have to think about that. My website is ampupyourvoice.com, all lowercase, one word. My preferred platform is LinkedIn. So I'm Johanne Penney, which is JohannePenney. You can find me on LinkedIn. And then my Insta is Amp Up Your Voice, all one word as well.
Cool.
And my closing remarks. I'm always laughing as well. Always laughing. My closing remarks are, I don't know really, just, if you're in this space, if you are a de&i practitioner, or you have your own business or consultancy, or if you're a corporate, let's just keep the momentum going, support each other. One of my strongest ethoses is women supporting women and collaboration. And actually, it takes, it's cliche, but it takes an army. And actually, I think everyone working together will shift the dial and make those changes that we really want to achieve. And I think we need to move away from, being siloed and really achieve that together. Yeah, and I'm really hopeful. So yeah, mate, and I'm excited to see what's to come.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing all of that. Thank you for everything. And I definitely wholeheartedly agree with the supporting aspects of things. There's a really cool, I've even forgotten it, I'm going to butcher it. There's a parable which I'm going to butcher if I try and say it again because I've forgotten it. But essentially, it's talking about the strength and unity. So, like, you can, what does it sound like? You might have heard it. Something about a straw, one straw. I can't remember. Something about, I don't know it.
I know the straw that breaks the camel's back.
No, it's not that. Like, or maybe a stick. Like, it's easier to break one stick, but if you've got two or three wrapped up together, it's going to be more difficult. Basically, there's strength in that unity.
Yeah, there is.
So definitely, wholeheartedly agree with that. So thanks for coming on. If you're listening and you like what Amp Up Your Voice are doing, I'm sure, offer your support in any way, shape or form, whether that's through contacts, time, whatever. Like, we need more people like Jo doing the amazing work that she's doing. And if you can support in any way, please do. On that note as well, with 1000 Voices, if you can support us by liking this episode, sharing it, tell your friend who shared it to share it to their friends, get them to like it, get them to subscribe, to leave us a rating or review. All of those little things really, really do help in us trying to amplify the voices of the people that we get on here. We're trying to get 1,000 Black British changemakers. We still got a little bit of a way to go. But if you could help us along the way by just taking 30 seconds to like, share, subscribe, it really, really helps us to get these voices out there. So please do. But that's that for now. Thank you for tuning in, people. This is 1000 Voices. We had Joe Penney on the podcast, and for now, we're out. Cool. All done.
Yay.